Welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the 522nd meeting of Canterbury Regional Council. It's really great to see so many members of the public here this morning and people are going to make submissions to us. It's really, really good. It's a real good, healthy sign of representative democracy. So we really welcome you to the room. And in particular, we welcome Mike Padgett of the Water and Wildlife Trust, Davina Penny and Anna Youngman, who will be speaking at the public forum, and they'll be speaking about particular dust issues on the west side of the city. Welcome also to Graham Townsend, who's taken the opportunity to make a submission to us. It's a deputation around our climate change commission submission that we've made, and he's from 350.org. So welcome, Graham. And later in the meeting today, we're going to have our representatives, our community representatives, David Ashby, Carolyn Latham, and also Ted Howard and Matt Bayliss, who will be either in the room or online talking to us about the Water Zone Committee's work in various areas. More formally, we have a late item that we have to tell you about that's going on our agenda. It's a type of administrative item. It's about local government New Zealand, and it's about the sector groups that they have. We are in the regional sector in Zone 5 sector, which represents, in Zone 5 and 6 meet together. They are taking the whole of the South Island and the Chatham Islands. So we meet together to talk about the wider picture of local government in New Zealand and how we can be a much stronger collective voice into talking with our central government. We will be taking this resolution after 1 o'clock, around 1:15, followed by a notice of motion that we've got on transport buses in our city specifically, and we'll be doing the climate change update after that. I'd just like to note that this is going to be available online. It's not being live streamed, but you'll be able to see the video on the website. And just in that space, I'd like to just make a note for people listening in online at the moment, and it's only staff members today. We won't be having any chat running online. A formal council meeting, there's only one conversation and it's in the room. And now I'd like to invite our Tumu Taiao, Yay and Cranwell, to give up mihi whakatau. Thank you.
O tēnā te ruru, te kaukau mai nei ki hai mā, hiti ki hai mā, raka te whakanui o te ruru, te repa. He pohe au kawa te tihei wa mauri ora. Me tu tai ki te kurukarawa, no nā te timataka, no nā te whakamika. Ori no anō hoki nāna tata katoa mana ki te aki ka wākato. Ka huri au ki a rātou kuahi au ki te pō, haere, moi rā hoki o kimo. Ka huri taku aro ki te awo waiho, te kōhako o te tuna hao, e te raketira jungle ki e haere, moi rā hoki o kimo. Kaori mātou I wari tia koe hei tia ki mana ki te rawatai au, tia ki mana ki ngā warere mai ngā kātiritiri o te moana tai atu, ki te tai o mā hanui. Ko koe te kōnohi, ko koe te rika raupa, he kawe I ngā tuna, mai ngā roto, tai atu ki te moana, o te aha, o te hōkika mai, ki te takiwā nei. Nō reire te rakitira, e John, haere atura, oi mai rā o ki o kima. Aptena tātai hono, rātou ki a rātou. Aptena tātai hono, tātou ki a rātou. Nō reire te naku. Nei te mihi a ngai tuaruri ki a koutu katoa rauika mai I tēnei rakairaro I tēnei tuanui o te whare nei. Nei ana te mihi ki a koutou ka hara mai ki te kōrere pānara rawatai au. Aha ko te aha, hara mai, nau mai, ki te kōrero I tēnei rā. Hoki, e whakanui te wiki nei. Te wiki nei o te takatāpu. E whakanui I ngā hapori katoa, Kia o tautahi mo tēnei wiki, kia kaha, kia mai, ki mana nui. Hoki tēnei wiki, te wiki o te moana, e tiaki i ngā tini o Takaroa, o aki tōnu atu, nō reira, e mihi anō kia koutou nau mai hara mai. Ka huri au ki te reo tuarua, ka mōhi o hea taku kōrero. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome here today. I welcome you here on behalf of Ngai Tuahuriri. I also acknowledge the passing of John Wilkie. John Wilkie was a toa, was a warrior for our environment. A short man in stature with a heart of gold. From the mountains to the sea, he was there protecting our rivers, protecting our environment. He loved the hekiao, he loved the waiho and the waitaki. One of his passions was our mahika kai, our food resources, and he would go inland, gather our tuna, our migrating tuna, and assist them going from the mountains to the sea so they could go out to the moana nui a kiwa and spawn so their young could come back and the life cycle could continue. Unfortunately, after a long illness, John passed away last week. He'll be with his beautiful wife at peace now. So go, John, go in our loving memories. We'll never forget you. You've taught us so much in your life on this earth. Nō reira, e te rangatira, moi mai, oki mai. Also acknowledging Pride Week here in Ōtautahi, celebrating our diversity here in Environment Canterbury and also in our community. And just remember, aroha ki te takata, manaki tetai ki tetai, love to all, support one another. And of course, as acknowledging John and John's passing, that he loved the moana as well, and also acknowledging Sea Week, that we look after not only our land, but our sea as well, for us and our children after us. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou.
And now I'd like to invite, thank you, Tumu Taiao, and Crenwell. Now I'd like to invite Councillor Vicky Southworth to give us a karakia.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki kai. E hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora.
Welcome, Ted. I can see you there. I hope you can hear us. Great. You'll be presenting your report a bit later on, but it's lovely to see you at this stage. Thanks for joining us. Now we'll move on with the formal agenda. We have apologies. I don't know of any apologies. All the councillors are present today. We record our conflicts of interest. I haven't been told that anybody's conflicts of interest have changed since our last meeting. Now we have what's called a public forum, deputations and petitions. So you can come to us with issues in our public forums, deputations around things that are on our agenda, and we'd love to get a petition from you if you've got something particularly you'd like to tell us about. So we're just starting off, we've got you in a particular order, so you'll just have to go with the order that we've organised you. So first of all, we're going to have Mike Patchett. Welcome to the table, Mike. Mike's from the Water and Wildlife Trust, and he's here today to talk to us about their work. So I won't say any more, but it's lovely to have you here and thank you for coming. After each person speaks, we'll look into the issue and the CEO will be writing a response for people. So that'll be really good.
Firstly, I'd like to show my appreciation for the council to giving the trust and myself an opportunity to probably tell you an exciting story about a potential for a collaborative partnership for the Otakaikino catchment. The trust has been operating for about 9 years now. We've got current projects that are finishing up after about their 4th year in the Selwyn catchment, working with dairy farmers on waterway restoration. That's multiple donors funding those projects, and we're now looking for our next line of projects and scanning the province. The trustees have chosen the Otakaikino as our top priority catchment. Trust works by advocating for healthy waterways and the protection of Indigenous biodiversity, and ecologically sustainable land use practices, along with community education and stewardship. We operate by facilitating, building the knowledge and understanding of the values and threats and solutions of some of our catchments, and facilitating collaborative partnerships to be the honest broker, looking at a catchment scale approach and associated property level action planning. We also see ourselves facilitating the partnership formation and the resourcing of that through the partners and through sponsorship and the leverage that can be gained. We also see ourselves being involved in the monitoring, evaluation, reporting, and celebrating our successes. The Atakaikino catchment, as many of you may know, runs along the side of the Waimakariri River. It's only about 16 square kilometres in size, but it is a complex system of springs, wetlands, waterways, and lakes, quite unique for its scale and size in Canterbury. The catchment comparatively has high ecological, environmental, and social values. It has the waterways itself are rated as good to poor in terms of ecological health. It was rated last year as having the best water quality in the Greater Christchurch region. It has significant ecological values and rare and threatened species, both terrestrial and aquatic. And it has significant cultural heritage values for the Runanga. It has currently high recreational values with its the Groins Regional Park and the network of public and private trails and bikeways throughout the catchment that are connected. This is a map of ECAN's most current assessment of the ecological health of the catchment. The red and the orange dots being those of poor and fair ecological health, and the green dots being those of good. You can see there that it's a localised impact scenario with some of our tributaries being in quite poor health, but then joining the larger waterways and picking up some health. But the general picture there is there's more orange and red than there is green. So there's work to be done to improve the health of those waterways. This is one I'd particularly like you to focus on, the Waimakariri at the top and the Atakaikino below it. The blue shaded area is land, public lands administered by ECAN. And given the history of this catchment, where it was the southern arm of the Waimakariri before the flood control stop banks were put in, there is significant public lands administered by Environment Canterbury in the mid to lower catchment. And I'll come to that later. This is just one of those parcels of land that we've been working with some of your officers quite productively and constructively to look at the opportunities for ecological restoration. So this is one site on ECAN land currently short-term leased for grazing, where we have springs and wetlands and waterways along the existing main trunk of the Atakaikino, where we could invest in ecological restoration. What we're advocating is a 5-year healthy waterways and catchment partnership with multiple players, both private and public landowners, joining forces in a true collaborative arrangement, working on a 5-year project plan, taking a whole of catchment approach. It's quite a unique situation where you can do that with this catchment for its size. And those partners would form a governing structure to coordinate resources and activities on the ground through time. Whilst it's a 5-year proposition, it's probably a 20-year plus journey. One of the key issues in discussion so far, there are some, I think, some serious, significant policy issues that I'd like to bring to your attention. Obviously, I've had a chance to look at the draft long-term plan, and there are a number of initiatives in that and commitments by council that are of great interest towards that catchment. One in particular is ECAN's commitment to demonstrate best practice land management for its public lands, both for healthy waterways, biodiversity enhancement, and open space recreation. We've got elements from the Brave River Revival program next to the Waimakariri, the tree planting program in priority catchments, good initiatives as well. We've got current investments in drainage and flood control in the catchment, the lower reaches, that's underway currently and will continue for a number of years, working up the catchment, removing large willows obstructing flow. We've got wetlands and biodiversity restoration programs and proposing contestable funds. So I commend council on their reasonably courageous foresight in putting forward an ambitious investment proposition for the greater good of Canterbury's environment. But by looking at that suggests that we still have limited funds, and it's based on where you best prioritise your investment, so where you get best bang for buck. We would put to the council that the Otukai Kino should be a priority catchment in the next 4 or 5 years, and that the programs in the long-term plan could align and resource into that program in a more orderly and constructive manner. One of the other big ones, I think, for the council is the public land that you own and the conversion of its current use from grazing weed control to a healthy waterways, indigenous biodiversity enhancement and open space recreation type land uses along the riparian areas and the wetlands. That does leave a significant amount of that ECAN land remaining in grazing. So it's really a mixed land use bag, but there's great opportunities for wide riparian margins and wetland conservation. What we have done in the past is identify with ECAN some of the champions for the catchment, such as Arthur Adcock, some 13 areas of ECAN land along that waterway that could be designated for ecological restoration. We're currently working on 4 of those areas, and I showed you that map earlier, where we're working out how best to tackle the restoration of some of those critical riparian wetland areas, getting to the point of having plant lists and costing schedules for both establishment and maintenance. It's not a cheap exercise, but the long-term proposition. So we're gearing up to get a better handle on what the investment opportunities might be. There's another issue of the revenue that ECAN generates from the grazing leases in that catchment is significant. Currently, as I understand, that revenue is diverted into the sort of drainage engineering flood control bucket. That money, all of it or some of it, could be diverted to the long-term restoration of the land that you manage, partnership with the other players in this collaborative partnership. That would require ECAN to look at probably creating a new policy on land conversion from its current grazing weed control to conservation restoration, consistent with the freshwater policy reforms both at regional and national level. One of the other big issues that we're seeing is for this sort of community-driven collaborative partnership model, there is significant regulatory requirements on us as a group. In this case, ECAN is the major landowner, the major regulator. It's a collaborative partnership. So we're seeking a sort of a permissions approach whereby other players can come in and work with you on the ecological restoration work, getting our, I suppose, the permissions of streamlined approval process for our weed control and our revegetation, our planting programs, potentially taking water intermittently for the watering of our young plants in the first year or two. And in the longer term proposition, putting in sediment traps as part of a research and development program to look at sediment source and load assessment so we can get a better handle on control of the primary impactor on that catchment. We've also got a collaborative partnership with the Department of Corrections. They work in the catchment currently, and they're prepared to substantially increase the amount of community work teams in the catchment and potentially over the next 5 years put in about $1.5 million of labour resources on ECAN land, doing the planting and weed control. But that requires your approval for that presence. The proposition of setting up a container storage base and a bit of shelter so we can get maximum efficiency of those community workers while they're working in that catchment. So a streamlined approach to the regulatory permissions is being sought. And finally, we're looking for a collaborative partnership in a formal sense. Currently, you deal with that on a larger scale through a memorandum of understanding, as I see it. We're looking at a more flexible approach for a community-based or community-led programs on smaller scale catchments. That isn't too laborious to get through and clearly establishes roles and responsibilities. And then finally, I'd just like to leave you with the opportunity that we would like ECAN to consider formally joining a collaborative partnership with the other players, considering the policy issues that I've put forward and looking at policy reforms to better initiate this program, and looking at the opportunities for program alignment in the long-term plan that can bring in trees and water restoration resources into this catchment in the long term. I thank you for your attention, and I would recommend through the chair that the council refer this proposition of a partnership and the policy issues raised to your chief executive for further investigation and to report back to council so that this conversation about a collaborative partnership can continue in an orderly and constructive way. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. That was a fantastic idea, if you ask me. And I love collaboration. So thank you. And thank you for being so timely in terms of our long-term plan. It's just what we want, really. And now we'll have a few speakers to ask you questions and then we'll look at the resolution. So Councillor Clearwater will go first.
Thank you very much, Mike. Very impressive presentation. Thank you so much. And so much excellent work that's been done. And we can want to be part of the partnership. What there's a whole lot of things you really suggested which I find really exciting. When you referred to the Department of Corrections, I just wondered if you might be able to sort of tell us specifically how that might work. But what I'm also interested in, perhaps for us as a council, in having a partnership with Corrections, is that how, in fact, like them doing $1.5 million of work is huge. So it could be a good investment. But I'm wondering too, if besides the whole environmental well-being, if there might, with us having a partnership with Corrections, through using sort of some kind of not just land restoration, but people restoration. I mean, the young offenders, especially, who are doing that work. But in fact, we can kind of like promote that sort of social side, social rehabilitation as well. What you think of that, but also specifically how we might specifically assist them in terms of other hardware.
Corrections has been working the catchment off and on for a number of years, so they sort of have some sort of commitment to it. My discussions with the supervisors and their managers, a couple of layers, indicates to me that they are prepared to significantly ramp up the number of community work crews in the catchment. But they do about 6 hours a day. Increase the number of days per week, and particularly take on committed tasks in a coordinated way, which sort of doesn't happen now. So they've got great capacity for weed control, not only chipping out weeds, but cutting and pasting willows along the waterways. They've got a great capacity to plant trees and make tracks. So they're prepared to effectively put in what is equivalent to about $1.5 million worth of labour resource into that catchment over the next 5 years, particularly focused on working on some of those parcels of ECAN land. And that area that I put up with all the colours on it is their favourite site to operate. It's a fairly big area. That's why we'd like to have a container base with some shade and catering facilities, tool storage, and a toilet, so they can basically stay on base varying weathers and get as much work done as possible. I've seen them operating. They've got a good supervisor in this case. We're looking at a couple of crews coming in. I take your point. It would be good to have that environmental education and awareness alongside their work. That could certainly be a positive addition to supporting that program. That is something the Trust could in fact do, or even have it, some of your officers dedicate some of their time to explaining the ecology and the benefits of ecological restoration.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lantan.
Yeah, thanks so much for that presentation, Mike. It was very thoughtful and considered, and I particularly appreciate how you're looking at the wider policy changes in your recommendations. So it's not just about your patch in the Otakakino, it's applicable to groups elsewhere, and they could really benefit from those changes too. My question was specifically around what you're asking for today. Are you asking generally for this partnership approach, or do you already have envisaged some specific dollar amounts that you will be asking for as part of our long-term plan, or is it more about let's figure this out together? Sorry, just your button, Mike.
I'm working at an officer level and sort of middle management, and that's been quite constructive. I commend the staff for their willingness to do that and their expertise. But I need to bring it up to a council level, formalise the partnership, because there are resource implications and resource commitments, both in kind and in cash. When we sit down and figure out what we need to do over the next 5 years, you're a major player. So I suppose your bureaucracy needs a direction to work towards a formal arrangement and consider more formally in kind and cash contributions alongside the other partners. So we've got a fair bit done, but we need to formalise the arrangements and lock it in.
you. We'll certainly be positively considering that. The next speaker will be Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Thank you very much for that, Mike. And sort of in a opposite from Lance big picture question, I was really interested in you've got a number of different tributaries there which have got poorer ecological health, but they look like they come through quite different land use areas. And I wonder, do you understand? Are you at the point where you understand what the issues are within each of those catchments and can pull together sub-catchment groups, as you talked about, to address those specific issues, or is there need for some further scientific assessment to then know how to move forward?
Probably the latter. I got that information from you, and looked at I mean, you can stare at that slide for a number of hours. My advice from ECAN is there's no clear pattern there. We have general land use, it's mainly rural, cattle and sheep grazing primarily. But we know that the sediment source is one of our primary impactors. We've got nutrients, obviously, and our pathogens for another issue in terms of public health. So that it's not well understood as to what's driving those degradations. That's certainly subject to more information. But what we do know is where the riparian areas have been restored, and that's probably an example. That's 8 years worth of rehab. It was a green paddock stream. Now the Isaacs Conservation Reserve, where we have those waterway restoration reaches of the catchment, we have good ecological health. We don't, it's degraded. So it's a habitat stream riparian probably driver, most important.
Thank you very much. Now, I'll just say to councillors, we've got a few people coming today, so just keep your comments and your questions short. We'll keep going. The next person will be Ian McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You referred to diverting a great project and all that stuff, but you referred to diverting money from flood protection to ecological restoration, and that in itself, I don't think is a major issue in terms of how ECAN does it. But who gets flooded and what is the risk of flooding from the Otakano on? I mean, other rural residency. I mean, urban suburb residencies that get flooded that are protected by flood works, or
my understanding is that the drainage engineers of ECAN are currently pulling out major willows in that lower reach, basically because willows are basically encroaching and impeding flow. So if for some reason the banks further up were to be breached, then major flood flows would come through to go back in, because it was the southern branch of the back in the day. Then they're making sure that those flood flow paths are open for a quick exit. So there's significant investment in willow removal, the lower reaches. My understanding is that the catchment's a bit unique given the level of public lands, and for some reason that the revenue generated by the leasing of the land just drops into the drainage flood control bucket, just to beef it up beyond your levies for drainage control.
Thank you. We'll have a look at that. So sorry, but we'll just keep moving on. I think we're getting a bit behind here. Councillor Marshall, just brief, thanks.
Thank you very much. Just two questions. Have you also, it sounds like you've basically got your business proposal together for the action here. Have you shared that with the government and other potential funding agencies, for example, the Freshwater Improvement Fund that was open until recently, to get other income sources to support this action? And also, have you considered signing up to the community water partnership that's being established here in the city? Your button again, please, Mike.
Yeah, we're working out the project plan and the costings. Working out the project plan and the costings, I must admit, we have actually lodged a Jobs for Nature program in partnership with Waiora contractors. But when it came to the Freshwater Improvement Fund, we didn't have our ducks lined up effectively. I mean, I filled out the form, and when you have to tick all the boxes about have I got all the landowners, and you guys are a major landowner, are they on board? Where's the approval? I don't have it. Where's the in-kind contribution from those partners? We're talking about it, but I don't have it. So my gut feeling was we weren't ready to put forward a major central government funding application. But I'm hoping that by the end of this year, we can formalise these arrangements. We will have all those ducks lined up, and we're in a far better position to put forward a proposition to leverage central government funding in the future. And secondly, we have committed to sign up to that partnership. We support it, and we'll be attending the celebration event soon.
That's excellent. We're all going to see you there. And of course, you know, a big organisation like that, of course, we can help with all of that. So thanks for letting us know that. We'll just got Megan and then Liz, and then we'll thank you. So Councillor Megan Hand.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks very much for your presentation today. And it was just really interesting project. But one particular comment that resonated for me, and that I'm quite interested in, is you talked about a streamlined permissions approach, and I assume you're talking about making it easier to get consents and the likes for some of these works in future. And that's something that comes up a lot with different landowners, that sometimes our regulatory plans that are designed to protect the environment also make it really hard to do good environmental projects. So I was interested, because you also rightly referred to our long-term plan, and that there's a proposal for a large rates rise to help fund some of these things, but there's still not enough money. And that's something we grapple with. So I'm always interested in ways that we can be more efficient. So going back to that permissions approach, in your view, are you able to give some comment around community groups trying to do good environmental works, and that would flow through to other landowners too? Whether, in terms of best spend or best focus for us as a council, would be around doing some work to streamline some of those regulatory processes to make it less costly to do good works, or whether we're better to put money into funds in order to be contestable to do the works. If you could choose one, I know I'm putting you on the spot because I know it's not that simple, but if you could choose one, what do you think would be more helpful for groups like yourself?
I won't choose one, I'll choose two. The permissions approach is basically, you're the landowner. This is a collaborative partnership. We're just here to help you collectively do a good job. So put yourselves in the landowner position, you're also the regulator. So our permissions approach is really a simplified, yes, you can do A, B, and C to this standard. It might be willow control or re-veg, and we'll do it collectively with some oversight from ECAN. So it's a very simple go ahead, but stick to the rules rather than a consent document process. And secondly, you can contribute significant in-kind resources from your staff inputs, and there are investments being proposed long-term plan that, if they were aligned, it's a program alignment issue, aligning those programs into the Otakino, money can be flowed through time through that vehicle.
It's excellent. Thank you very much. Just one final question and comment from our Councillor Liz McKenzie.
Just a question. You made the comment about Environment Canterbury possibly changing policy on land conversion and land use. Can you elaborate a bit more on what you think the ideal sort of policy might contain?
It's a policy that, if you take the Otakino, possibly a good case study to develop it in the long term, but you have significant public lands along the riparian zones of the waterways, main channel, and in wetlands surrounding, beyond the rural lands. So it's taking your public lands that are under grazing leases in this case and saying, let's make wide riparian margins, 30, 40 metres either side. Let's provide for tracks and access ways through those areas, connecting to public walkways. Let's identify our wetlands and make sure we've got good riparian margins around those, and they're protected. It leaves still a lot of grazing, in this case, grazing land available for continuing lease. So it's looking at the multiple best use of your public lands for healthy waterways, indigenous biodiversity enhancement, and open space recreation. So it's a planning exercise based on sound policy as to what that conversion should look like in the public interest.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much for preparing the presentation and coming along here today and working with our staff earlier. It certainly sounds like a fantastic chance for us to have the community involved with our land, and I think you have a council that's very interested in this work. So thank you very much for coming along today. We really thank you for that, and we're looking forward to working with you more closely. So what we'll do now is we will will call for a mover and seconder to recommend that we receive the information from the Water and Wildlife Trust, and we're referring this to our Chief Executive to reply and do a bit of an investigation around that. That's moved by Councillor Phil Clearwater and seconded by Councillor Lan Farn. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. Thank you very much. I don't think there's anybody against. Thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay and just for as long as you like. So the next person that we will be having up to present to our table is Davina Penny. Who's welcome to come to the table, Davina. And she's going to be talking to us about quarry issues on the west side of town. Now, we had some videos that you may have seen that we've circulated that were sent in by Davina, and those have been circulated.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We will shortly be landing in Christchurch, the city of the long grey dust cloud. It has been renamed due to the fact it's being converted into quarries, and if you look out the window of this aircraft, you will see some of those quarries, and may be unfortunate to see one of the clouds also, and we do hope you enjoy your stay. I'll just say thank you for allowing me to present today. It really is appreciated. As you can see, my presentation is regarding the consenting of quarries in this city and surrounding rural area. And before I start, I'd like to extend a thanks to Mike from the Community Board and also from Ross from the Residents Association, who have offered their continued support. It is very appreciated. Fulton Hogan indicated if Roydon were consented, it would take the available amount of aggregate in this region to 28 years of supply. Without Roydon, there is still 23 years worth of aggregate. I'm aware of 4 applications either undergoing a consent process or are going to be lodging applications for extensions, including a current Christchurch City Councillor who wants to quarry Roberts Road. And it's likely these will take availability to 25 years or 30 years plus, depending on the outcome of the Roydon appeal. So if you can just let that sink in. Then consider this image to gain an understanding of how the west of the city is being overrun by quarries. This is from a document submitted to the Christchurch City Council. Current consents are clearly shown in red. This does not include the vast quarry region near McLean's Island. And known or ongoing or forthcoming consents are shown in blue. And the white areas are sites identified as potential sites in the report to the Christchurch Council, which was in 2014. So with Roydon being consented by commissioners, it can be assumed the other sites, if applied for, would also likely be consented. We have in effect lost Yaldhurst, and Templeton is likely to follow, a significant proportion of Christchurch, which I believe is the only city being allowed to have quarries in a city. This decimation cannot be considered as sustainable management of the environment or resources, particularly as Roydon is mostly LUC2 and then LUC3 land, something that is detailed and given importance through the regional policy statement. But due to this being subject to appeal, I won't be discussing that further. We then have the issue of the obligations of all councils, and I now show you section 23 of the Health Act. And it's clear all councils have a duty of care. And by agreeing to negligible setbacks at consent hearings, despite adequate evidence of dispersal distances of PM10 in particulate matter, the health impacts of PM10, other particulate matter, and respirable crystalline silica, I do suggest councils are failing in that duty of care. This is compounded by ECAN claims that dust is a nuisance issue and not a risk to health, and this will be discussed further. So why is this relevant? Mitigation measures used in New Zealand are inadequate. There is a reliance on water use, and often this is in the form of a water cart. One water cart is shared between Fulton Hogan's Pound Road and Barter's Road sites. One cart. Out of hours cover is non-existent, and unfortunately wind does not abide by quarry opening times, and nor does rain. So what you were looking at are examples of what mitigation should look like and what is used elsewhere in the world. Operators should be using profits to invest in these measures, but instead opt to rely on water, which is free. Your reporting staff second claims that our industry is operating at best or good practice, and I think everybody who's experienced quarrying would beg to differ. My final point is the issue of inappropriately allowing your website to classify PM10 as nuisance dust and then playing the risk to health. This is the comment shown, which was publicly cited in June 2018 in response to the moat monitoring programme which occurred in Yaldhurst. And just to say, there was an admission of being wrong in saying PM10 was a nuisance dust, with this admission and mention of retraction occurring in the presence of ECAN staff, but no public retraction has occurred. And this statement is one that is grasped by operators and quoted at consent hearings and applications and accepted by the decision makers. The person who made the comment has said it is inaccurate. Therefore, by showing this on your website, ECAN is potentially misleading the public and in turn decision makers, and it's wrongly contributing to decisions that result in consents with inadequate setbacks. It is therefore, I believe, unacceptable for ECAN to have further claims on the website that there is no evidence that such dust is harmful, an even worse comment than that previously shown. And this relates to the data collecting which is currently occurring in McLean's Island Quarry area. I think it's fair to say the World Health Organization would disagree. And we can see here the comment which I took from one of their 96-page documents on dust from an online search. So it's therefore no surprise we see this comment on Fulton Hogan's website as of October 2018. This is relating to the moat monitoring which occurred. There were 12 nuisance triggers of PM10, nuisance dust. Hence, the occurrence of dust is an environmental one, not the health one. You will see a 42-second video, again, of what happens when there is a nor'wester and inadequate mitigation. And when the family living nearby, and we have one of the family members here today, they're in effect inhaling concrete dust. It's offensive for ECAN to keep espousing in the mantra of it only being a nuisance from time to time. But I recommend you all look up the health risks of concrete dust. And just to add, one of the operators mentioned does not have a consent to use and take water. The current status quo is unsustainable and it's impacting the environment. The time has come for councils to pull back in their perceived support of the industry and fulfil their legal obligations to the communities as shown by the Health Act. And these are the action points I do respectfully ask be considered today. There is no need for more quarries for the near future. There's enough supply, and I suspect there will be a flurry of applications to try and get in before the RMA is replaced, and this should not be allowed to happen. You saw the image. Communities are already squeezed to the west of the city, and if this is allowed to continue, they will just become further meat in the sandwich. And I ask that until such time the RMA is replaced, there is due regard to the requirement to sustainably manage resources. We're at that point now. There should not be the support of grandfathering in of consents in the case of any replacement. The RMA is more stringent and offers more protections. Substantial setbacks are needed that are adequate to protect the community or residents at all times. Dr. Humphrey and Dr. Willoughby submitted a report, and it was at ECAN's request into a consent application in 2018, but ECAN did not enter the report into the hearing. The reasoned request was for a setback of 500 metres measured to the property boundary, and if that 500 metres could not be applied, the recommendation was that consent should be declined. Any recommendations by local councils into the replacement of the RMA should include this setback as an absolute minimum. Anything less will be evidence that the industry is still being appeased. And with the Ministry of Environment citing a dispersal distance of 1 kilometre, that would be more appropriate as a setback distance. Industry routinely requests minimal setbacks, and these are regularly endorsed by reporting staff of the council who agree with that the mitigation measures, which I've shown are inadequate in New Zealand, impacts beyond this distance will be less than minor, but the evidence is clear it's not. Therefore, I ask that reporting staff acknowledge evidence and science and tie that in with the fact mitigation is poor in this region, particularly out of hours, and support a minimum of 500 metres from quarry boundary to property boundary, as was requested by the CDHB. And if a resident is given the same rights as those in a residential zone, again, I do ask that that 1 kilometre is considered. ECAN are strict with cow barns. There would not be one within 500 metres of a residential property or within 1 kilometre of a residential zone. Now, I'm not aware that counts when they toot are dispersing PM10 or crystalline silica. So I do ask, please, can the councils not agree to 200 metres measured to a dwelling as a setback for quarry? And finally, I do ask that the comments on your website, which I believe are incorrect, misleading, and are quite dangerous due to the fact they are used at consent hearings, can these please be replaced with a more accurate and more representative statement? The World Health Organization has plenty of citations that would be appropriate and have credibility. And with the industry also being advised, if they still misuse the current quotes at hearings, that your reporting officers will be obliged to address that in their reporting. ECAN cannot on one hand claim emissions from wood burners is a health concern and be strict about wood burners, but then be dismissive of the impacts on communities from quarry emissions, which also include particulate PM10 and smaller, along with crystalline silica. It would be unfortunate if this misreporting continues, that the only action left to residents would be that of legal action. Communities must be protected. And now for the video. It's a 40-second video. It was confirmed on Monday. It was confirmed through a phone call on Monday that no action has been taken against any operator. So I do ask the VCAN staff today, councillors today, can this please be investigated, and can I be provided just with the reason as to why no action has been taken? If the reason is because it's not possible to proportion the cause, I think that would not be appropriate. If no action can be taken in such circumstances, the discharge to air consents in Yaldhurst are in effect non-enforceable, and it would bring into question should the consents have been granted. My name is Davina Penny, and I'm the person responsible for videoing the impacts you are witnessing on this video. This was recorded between 1:20 and 1:40 p.m. on the 19th of January 2021 in Panroad, Christchurch, where I was recording the dust impacts emitting from the Panroad quarries, those operators being Fulton Hogan and Ablets. The weather conditions at the time were high winds of significant strength. And I thank you for letting me present today.
Thank you very much, Davina, for your well research and local evidence presentation. It was really good. Now we'll just see if some councillors would like to ask any questions. Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
Yes, I'm quite interested. This council was elected subsequent to the 2018 council, so I'm very interested to hear more detail about the misquote or the retraction of the statement relating to, nuisance versus health. Can you inform me more about that?
Yes, I can. Dr. Humphrey was initially involved in the moat monitoring, but due to I think he was overseas, it was passed to another doctor from the Canterbury District Health Board, who didn't, it appears, have quite the same level of experience or involvement. And after the moat monitoring was conducted, he came out with a quote about it being a nuisance from time to time, no significant health risk. He was actually in attendance at one of the residents' addresses in Yaldhurst in July, just after he came out with that statement. And he is on audio, and it was done with his consent and knowledge. The whole thing was recorded by the resident, that he was wrong in saying PM10 was nuisance dust, and he was thinking of publicly retracting, and he has not done so. But unfortunately, that quote is still used heavily because it's on the website. And I can name 2 consent hearings where that was actually cited through the application.
Thank you for raising that, Davina. Anybody else like to ask a question? Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Thank you for your presentation. I was interested in the comment you made about the number of years, 25 years or so. I think you said that there is already consented gravel for to meet. So there's a knowledge of the amount of gravel being used per year, presumably, and how much is consented. And I'm just wondering, as a policy, and this is perhaps one for staff, do we have a policy around what is a reasonable future reserve quantity for an area to hold to meet its needs? Is there do we have some mechanism that manages that?
I think we'll just fold that question and our staff will come back to that on the investigation they do. So thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ian McKenzie.
Yeah, just in terms of the Royden quarry, you are aware that ECAN Section 42A report opposed granting those consents.
Yes, I'm aware the ECAN reporting staff actually opposed the consent. She did have concerns regarding the volume of water consented. And of course, I can't discuss that because it is under appeal, but that is certainly something where it's believed there is not adequate supply of water. If restrictions do go further, and I know we're awaiting a further reading from the trigger well, they will be down to using 250 cubic meters per day on average on that site, which is very low compared to other sites I've researched, which have.
Okay, well, I think that since that's all on appeal going on at the moment, we probably shouldn't be discussing it any further. So thanks. Councillor Nicole Marshall, and that'll be the last comment. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. One of your slides shows significant potential area of expansion. Obviously, that's better managed under City Council, so I'm assuming you are in conversation with City Council around the land management aspect of that and the zoning?
Not at the moment. This was my first port of call, if that makes sense, because ECAN covers both Selwyn and Christchurch. So, and also with the dust issues being primary, this is my first, but we will be in contact with Selwyn and Christchurch as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Davina, and thank you for contributing to your community and you know, well-being in your area. So thank you for coming in and presenting that to us. We'll just call now for a resolution. I'm looking for a councillor to move this. Councillor Craig Pauling will move this, seconded by Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie, that the council receives information presented by Davina Penny today, and that we refer the matter to the CEO for some investigation and a reply. It says for a reply. So that's moved. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody against, I'll record that as carried. So thank you very much. Sincerely, thank you, Davina, for coming in. Now I'd like to, we should give you a tap. It's very, you know, it's very good to come and present to us all sitting around formally like this, so you deserve a clap. So we'd like to ask Anna Youngman to come to the table. Anna, you'd like to come up. Now, what we've got for the video, or what we've got there is just what you've given us on the memory stick that's on there, Anna. Yeah. So thank you very much, and it's over to you. You'll have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mine mainly will, my reputation will mainly be concerning my health, and we don't want to look back. Let's look forward. Is how I view it. I have been battling for many years with these quarries, starting from an extension on the old West Coast Road by Winstones, and many promises have been in the past. I have had senior members of your board and in my home 2 or 3 times, hand on heart, any more dust and visible dust, not mentioning the invisible dust, and the quarries will stop work instantly. James Tricker would endorse what I have just said because he has been present. But anyway, as I said, let's move forward. I supplied the video clip with the issue that was filmed by Fair Go that hopefully many of you or all of you have viewed. The big thing is myself and my neighbours have endured this dust now for quite a number of years in Yaldhurst. It dictates and ruins our lives and, more importantly, our health. We have to decide if it's safe to spend time outdoors, whether to do work. We have outdoors, we have 14 acres. My husband and I were commercially farming on hill country on the peninsula, and we know all about dust, but nothing compares with what we've had to endure. This video isn't going to be shown. So there are several quarries in Yaldhurst, not just one, and there are several plants operating. So the big thing is the crushers. So although I am a little further than 90 metres away, I experience it day after day, and nothing has been done to protect me. The pollution hotline, I was promised on several occasions, if they knew who it was, they would put me straight through and an officer would come out and check. Look, I have left messages 3 to 4 years ago, and I'm still waiting. In desperation, I went to Australia and consulted a specialist there, because it was just getting worse and worse, and my direct neighbours were having the same problems. When we wake up, blood, coughing up blood, the dry cough, our eyes just virtually impossible to see some days. Which one is that? Sorry about this. The dust is just something that I can't explain. When it gets into your lungs and in the early hours of the morning, and you just can't get your breath, it's as simple as that. I took with me samples from my neighbours. 5 of us are under the specialist. Now, he is a specialist in Australia, and he sees the end result of what we're putting up with. It's a nightmare, it really is. If any of us were unfortunate enough to get COVID, I don't want to tell you what the end will be, and I have got. I mean, I can back up what I'm telling you. It's 100%. What I'm asking is for a setback distance from the quarries to neighbours. We're the only country in the world that hasn't got that. This is just unbelievable. I've spent 3 hours with Erin Brockovich. She couldn't believe it when she realised and saw the photos, etc. And her advice to me is just keep pushing. What about the next generation? I mean, who's going to remember? It has to be stopped now. I don't care which quarry. I mean, there's just so many, but they seem to just go on and on. And if you look at the video with the impacts on vehicles, every day that there has been crushing over the road from me, we get this dust. You can feel it. Chris Lynch came out and did a video clip, and he said when he got out the car, I can taste it and I can see there's a cloud over your property. The sensible thing would be to sell, as all doctors have advised, but look, who would want to go into a property like that? You couldn't expect anyone to. This is Thomas's eyes, and you know, day after day, it's like grit in the back of our eyes. It really is. The moat monitoring was flawed. It really was. It's just unbelievable. I contacted the person that was supposed to have peer reviewed in Australia after 5 requests from ECAN at the time. I finally got a name, and it wasn't quite like that. The program should have run for 12 months, not 3 months, and not the driest on record for a decade. And it just goes from there. It's unbelievable. We only had it, the monitors was only done for 3 months. And also during that time, the quarries were on Christmas holidays. So there we were with an inaccurate account of what we're enduring. That these are clips from Fair Go. There will be a follow-up. I don't want a follow-up, but they have suggested it's current affairs now because it's the same commissioners. These consents really don't mean a thing if they're not going to be followed up. This situation of no site visits, it's unbelievable. Paul Pulse advised you that there were independent experts involved in the reviewing of the monitoring that happened in Yaldhurst. I beg to differ. One of our reviewers was somebody who represented the industry at consent hearings, and the company she works for actively advertises for the quarry industry. Her name is Jenny Simpson of Tonkin and Taylor. That can't be seen as an independent person. Also, one of the reviewers was a woman who had worked at 2 quarries. She moved from one of the quarries to WorkSafe the month the monitoring program was set up, where she was immediately involved in the reviewing of the design before being involved in the reviewing of the data. Her name was Maria Baker. If you have someone from the quarry industry involved in this way, I would suggest that they are not likely to be independent. Well, yeah, that's it. Oh, not all. Sorry about this. Oh, okay. There are many more discrepancies, unfortunately, but I want to talk mainly about the boundary monitors quarries are supposed to have. Now, not all quarries have these monitors. ECAN do not know where they are. They do not know what types they are or how accurate they are. Why? Because the quarries supply and maintain them. Are they all in the correct place to accurately measure emissions? No. Councillor Pauling has seen one which was in a paddock on the other side of the quarry amongst trees. He also saw a monitor that was covered in netting. ECAN have said to a friend of mine that they are netted because of insects. Are these exceedances recorded? Who knows? Because if they are not reported, it is assumed that there has not been one. The system really is failing and is being allowed to fail by councils who do not exercise their authority in ensuring we are protected from these activities. I'll finish by saying that PM10 is not a nuisance dust, and I have that from experts. It is damaging. It's damaged my health, not damaging. It has done so. And the health of those around me. Not only is change needed moving forward, but a change is needed now. Enough is enough, and please, we do need a setback.
Thank you very much, Anna, for coming in and saying that so eloquently. It's very good of you. Is there and we will be investigating this and looking into it, and as you've indicated, Councillor Pauling has been out to the sites. Is there a councillor that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Councillor Grant Edge.
I was just wondering, have you had any discussions with the District Health Board and what people have come out to see you and what's your engagement with them?
I certainly have. I've had a member of the health board at 2 meetings at home, two right next door to me. I was told at the very first meeting, this member had seen my scan of my lungs. I was told James Tricker was present. The other 2 members were senior members board. Hand on heart was there saying, the dust will stop. We realised just how dangerous this is. When I went to the Queensland government authorities, on 3 occasions, they invited me back twice after I had visited originally. They couldn't believe it. The first time when I showed the expansion of all these quarries from Soul Quarry, Harewood Gravels, and so on, one of them stood up and said, hey, mate, this isn't a small quarry you've been describing. This is a super quarry. How has this been allowed so close to residents? This is what is so important. I'm not just a silly old lady that doesn't want quarries for whatever reason. This is genuine. And I'm sure that anyone that has been to my home and taken a video link and you saw Davina's footage, it's unbelievable. A lady 2 years ago in the Yaldhurst area made contact to say she had a 6-week-old baby, and some days she couldn't open her windows and she was afraid to take this baby out for a walk. Look, this is Christchurch, the Garden City. This isn't an act. Unfortunately, I wish it was. We are suffering. In fact, my direct neighbour is away on holiday at the moment. Her breathing is very bad. Every afternoon, she has to have a rest. I, by the end of the day, am absolutely exhausted, even if I haven't experienced my eyes streaming and blood in my nose. I actually phoned 3 members of the board of Fletcher's at the time and asked them to close the entrance on the old West Coast Road, because I had asked, James Tricker knows about this too, I had asked for ECAN or the council to please, if they stopped that, perhaps that would help, because the trucks were coming through and they said it was a wheel wash, but truly it was just like a garden hose and a trickle. And we then were getting the impact of that dust as they came out of the quarries, and that went on for probably 2 years. What we didn't realise was the accumulation of this dust, not what the results exactly are showing now for 3 of the driest months, but the impact. It's built up and up and up. Do you understand? Like a sandcastle. But this is a killer dust. It really is. The 2.5, which we can't see, is what is classed as the real killer. But PM10, 3 experts have told me, and they're dealing with it all the time, that is not just a nuisance dust. In Australia, the quarry would be fined $10 million, jail time, and a personal conviction. But they're not up against residents. I mean, the people I'm referring to on the old West Coast Road, we're living in a quarry 24/7. We're not shift workers, remember. Any work that we do outside, if the wind is such that it's bringing in the the dust, we just have to put on a mask, which we all know what that's like now, but we're better to stay indoors. And now these quarries are coming in behind schools, Gilberthorpe School, a preschool. It really frightens me to think that we know we've had the impact, we're living with it. Royden Quarry, now Rangiora. I mean, it is New Zealand. I hate being up front and being the public face virtually of the health deterioration, but it's the truth, and it's got to, something has to be done.
Yeah. Thank you, Davina. Well, we're really glad that you are here. And Anna, oh, sorry, I'm calling you Davina. I do know that Davina's sitting next to you. So, you know, my heart goes out to you, and we will investigate this and do whatever we can. Councillor Craig Pauling will be the last councillor to speak.
Kia ora, tēnā kōrua, Anna, Davina, nei rā te mi kia kōrua mō kōrua koiro e tēnei ata. Look, I don't want to ask any questions. I just want to acknowledge you two today for being brave and bringing the information you have. I mean, I'm particularly interested in the mitigation stuff that you showed us, Davina, that, you know, we use water here in Christchurch and Canterbury, but there is other ways to do it, so that's interesting. And yeah, of course, you know, acknowledge you for welcoming me out to your place recently, the whole team, and I just thank you for that. I don't know everything about this, so I'm learning, and I'm just trying to understand it. And of course, I know we've got our staff working on the issues as well. There's been previous work done, so yeah, we've got work to do in front of us. I just want to acknowledge you for coming today, being brave, bringing this to us so that everybody can understand a little bit more, and that we can look at it again. So, tēnā kōrua.
Very good of you to come. Thank you very much. Now we'll just move a resolution around that we receive the information from Anna Youngman, and that we refer it to the CEO to reply, and that's moved by Councillor Megan Hands and seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, I declare that is carried. Thank you very, very much. Now we're moving on our agenda to a deputation, and I'd ask Graham Townsend from 350.org to come up, and Graham's going to be speaking to us about the submission we've made to the Climate Change Commission. Welcome, Graham. Just have to push the button and you'll be on.
Good. Yes, thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to speak briefly. This deputation relates to the Environment Canterbury submission to the Climate Change Commission regarding their draft advice to the government. On behalf of 350 Otatahi, I would like to thank ECAN councillors and staff for their work on the current submission. In our view, it's an excellent summary of what's needed to shift Aotearoa to net zero greenhouse gases, and so give our kids a chance at a decent future. In particular, we fully support your submission point 25 regarding improvements to public transport, and your submission points 36 through to 40 regarding land use and urban planning. I would, however, like to make a few short comments, and I'll keep it brief. Firstly, regarding climate research, and perhaps most importantly, the latest research does suggest strongly that Earth's climate is trending towards the upper end of the warming range predicted by IPCC modelling. It appears entirely possible that we already have +2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial locked in. Furthermore, policymakers should not discount the possibility of future tipping points, which by their very nature are hard to predict. The NDCs set out in the Paris Agreement, therefore, would seem already possibly inadequate. In support of those statements, my deputation includes a number of references. I draw your attention to those. Now, this crisis is global and existential. We do not consider the emissions budgets in the CCC draft advice to government to be adequate. And so we urge you most strongly to press much harder for carbon budgets that reflect the need for urgency. I'll be dead before the worst consequences of any inaction hit our economy, but of course, younger people here and our children will still be around. Now, in terms of my part B, the circular economy, it may be that I don't need to stress that particularly here, unless anyone wishes me to. I might actually move on to part C, which I think is also a very, very important part of what I have to say here. In regards to your submission point 8 regarding cross-party support, the likelihood or unlikelihood of that, and point 14 regarding major social change, the required emphasis we need to get social change. We have the tools to deal with the climate crisis. The key problem seems to be public support and political will. A majority of the public now clearly accept that climate change is real, but there's a huge but there. The appetite for genuine practical change is lacking. We have an emotional attachment to our vehicles that goes well beyond the rational, and that goes for our lifestyle too. We've seen, it's just a small example, we've already seen the public backlash over something as simple as implementing cycleways. Behaviour change, in my view, is the key point where the whole enterprise stands or falls. Public involvement is vital. We have to somehow work with people and avoid divisiveness and finger pointing. There is already, as I've just mentioned, some negativity, much of it based on a poor understanding of the recommendations of the CCC draft advice, but some is also a genuine, understandable fear of consequences, particularly for the farming community. I have total sympathy for that, and also for those who are less well off. Now, all of this needs to be addressed with wisdom and good faith. Now, I cannot begin to suggest how either local or central government might contribute to the necessary shift in public attitudes. But I do know that without wide public support, we will end up, no matter what words are said, we will end up with political deadlock, bickering, and little progress actually being made. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for your excellent submission to the CCC. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for taking your time to come along here and thank us for our submission. That's very encouraging. And thank you for your signs. I'm sure there's a number of us in the room that totally love those signs. I'm one of them. I think we should go around doing this. I think congratulate you for your role in representative democracy. Jolly good on you. We need more of you. Phil, do you want to say something?
It's really, I just wondered if Graham might let us know, like in terms of the whole tenure of your deputation, Graham. My understanding is that in terms of the levels of decarbonisation that was agreed at the Paris Agreement, when the Paris Agreement was drawn up, in fact, as a country, we're a long way off. Is that your? And I just wonder if you could perhaps add to our understanding.
Yeah, well, currently, I mean, I'm not an expert in the figures here, but currently we are a long way off. I have seen one of my references quotes in general terms that nations need to up their cuts by something like 80% if we're going to meet the Paris targets. We're just not anywhere near getting to those targets, even with our current NDCs. And those NDCs may well be inadequate anyway. If current research is inadequate. I mean, it really is a crisis. It's a global crisis, and you know, quite frankly, I'm quite glad I don't have kids. It's that serious. My own background, I should say, is in physical chemistry, so I do have some understanding of the basic science.
Thank you. Is there any other councillor that would like to make a comment? Councillor Vicky Southworth.
Yeah, I thank you very much for your presentation. I'm really interested to know what key things, maybe 2 or 3 things that you think are really critical that we can do to either bring about behaviour change, things you would see people needing to do instead of what's currently happening. What do you can you say? I think it's X, Y, Z, a real critical thing.
I have no idea how to answer that question, seriously, because we live in a culture where conspicuous consumption is regarded as a good thing. You know, a couple of years ago, we were camping down at Lake Aviemore, and the whole campground was a sea of utes, caravans, trail bikes, quad bikes, jet skis, jet boats. It's just bizarre. And I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not guilty either. We're all part of this. I suppose what I'm asking for is some kind of task force. I don't know who would set up such a thing, to look at ways of making change to public opinion. And I really don't have any answers. We've all got to consume. I know I'm talking in general terms here. I'm talking about vague generalities. In dealing with this problem, I feel like I'm jelly wrestling. You know, you can't get to grips with it. I can't say this and this and this will solve the problem. It's public attitudes that need to change. I have no answers. I have no ideas.
Thank you. We'll just have Councillor Lan Fan as the last speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Graham, and thanks for being so specific in what you'd like to see us be stronger in our submission. My question is really just building on the behaviour change aspect. And I just wanted to let you know that there is a call within local government as a sector for central government to be running public campaigns similar to the scale of our reduction in smoking or no smoking campaigns, so that it's really general about behaviour change and people's understanding of climate impacts. In your comments around behaviour change, are you asking us in our submission to be clearly asking the Commission to be putting that in their advice to government, or do you mean you would like to see behaviour change elements within our own, like for example within our long-term plan?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a very good question. I think the former. I think we should all be pushing the government to take the business of getting the public on side far more seriously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was an excellent presentation, and I'm all for getting resilient psychologists in to help us talk about how we can move the public in a different direction. So thank you for emphasising that. I think it's a really, really important part of saving our planet. So now we'll just move on to the part where we actually move a resolution around your submission. We will receive the information from you, and so I'd like a mover for that, please. Councillor Nicole Marshall, seconded by Councillor Tane Apanui. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, there being nobody against, I'll pass that as carried. I'd just like to say, hold on a minute, I'll deal with you in a minute. We have instigated a series of, we have meetings regularly with public groups. So if we've just instigated a series of ongoing public meetings with Extinction Rebellion. So if 350.org would like to be involved in that or join in that, that would be great, because the more informed councillors can be as we go along, that's fantastic. And now, Councillor Lan Fan, are you going to talk about the submission? Okay, you go ahead.
Sorry, just a question in response to the previous deputation. In terms of, as the chair, would you prefer a response to that to be within the climate submission?
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, if that's all right for you. So what we'll do is we'll take any responses to what you've said when we do the submission. And at the moment, that's going to be a bit later in the afternoon because we've spent more time talking with the community. But I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's a real privilege to talk to you all, and just thank you very much for coming in. And that's why people get elected. We need to talk to the community, and often people feel like they can't talk to institutions like this, and I don't blame them. It's difficult. So it's great that you've come. Councillor Peter Scott.
Graham, I'm more than happy to have an informal discussion with you regarding our initiatives around rural transport, about regional transport and about South Island transport. You're probably not aware of some of the things we're doing. This is not the right forum for that, but if you want to take me up on that, more than happy to do that.
Yes, thank you very much. So it's great for you to all have engaged with us. Now, I'm just getting back to the formal agenda now. We have our regional water people waiting to present for the zone committees. So I'm turning, and we're going to deal with our formalities like the minutes. If anyone's worried about that later on today, we'll get to that. But we're going to go on to the people that we've got meeting in the room. And Ted will invite you to start speaking first, please. But first of all, before you do that, I'll just hand over to Councillor Claire Mackay, and she's just going to do a general introduction, and I'm just leaving the room for a minute. So if you just take over, Claire. Yes. You'll do that.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry, Ted and Matt, if you're still, Ted's still online. I'm presuming Matt's still online as well. Look, thank you very much for your patience and sitting there waiting to get to this item today. And I just really do want to share the appreciation of the fellow councillors sitting around the table that you have actually sat there and for so long. But look, the purpose of the reports that we're receiving today from the Kaikoura, Waimakariri and Upper Waitaki zone committees are to inform us of the progress in the last year around implementing the strategy in their zones. So I think the reports are actually all in our agenda, and I'm quite sure there'll be some questions from fellow councillors around that. But yes, Ted, I'll hand the floor over to you if you'd like to introduce the Kaikoura Zone Committee annual report.
Thank you very much, Claire. Can you hear me clearly?
Sure can.
Thank you. Yes, you've all got the written report in front of you. Last year was, as we all know, a tricky one. It was our last year of the nectar recovery works from the major earthquake. It's not our last year of dealing with the consequences of the earthquake. We'll probably be doing that for another decade or so. But yeah, COVID just chucked an extra layer on top of it because, once again, our tourism industry was basically killed. So we are dealing with a very stressed community. Actually, yesterday, Nigel Latter was invited to Kaikoura by the Rural Support Trust, and about 150 people showed up to the community hall to hear him talking about resilience in an anxious old world. So yeah, stress is a big thing. So the approach being taken by ECAN and Kaikoura are basically working with a coalition of the willing, looking to work with those people that are feeling sufficiently unstressed to be able to join with us and work on projects. I commend that approach. It's working really well. We've had some really good projects. Like a great thing to see last year was Lynn's stepping up with $250,000 funding in the Waiatawa Clarence to continue the work that we've been doing there or to contribute towards it for work that's been going on for 5 years now on weed and pest control. We had a very good report back from the nectar ecologists about what they'd seen in terms of native wildlife in the waterways and vegetation and what they had been doing. We had some very good wetland restoration works during the year. We've had some good community involvement on planting days. So things are happening, but we're stressed. Like November, we had good rain. December was about average. January and February this year have been about a third of the long-term average, just like 10 or 15 mils per month. Had our first rain this morning, 1.6 mils. So yeah, there's a bit of stress in the community, and water is definitely an issue. Anyone without irrigation's had no grass growth for 3 months. So yeah, pretty much life is normal in Canterbury in a sense. Water's a big issue. And the awareness of it is growing, and it's always complex. There's always multiple, as we all know, there's always multiple issues competing for our attention. And as we've just heard, global warming is not least amongst them. So, yeah, it's been a tough year. We've made some reasonable progress, and ask for any questions. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Ted. Good to hear your voice, by the way. We've now got you up on the big screen. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but anyway, we have. And you too, Matt. Would you like to say anything? Oh, all right. Questions for Ted first. Any questions for Ted? Grant, Councillor Grant.
Hi, Ted. I thought I'd just commend you on all the good work that you do in the Kaikoura Zone Committee and in other parts of the community as well. I'm enjoying coming up to Kaikoura every month to participate in your meetings. And I particularly like your comment in this report about your positive attitude, the fact that it's a journey and that you're looking forward to the journey every year because it's going to be different every year. I thought that was really good. In terms of the big achievements there, obviously the transport corridor is pretty important to people of Kaikoura, and that's looking pretty fantastic. So, and I know that the Zone Committee's been working through its actions for next year. Is there anything in particular that councillors? Well, I'm just wondering if you could just maybe let councillors know what the key projects are for this year.
I hadn't thought of. Sorry, Grant.
Maybe the Clarence River. Maybe describe what your vision is for Clarence.
The ongoing work in the Clarence, like the Clarence is the last major river that we've got in the South Island that hasn't been developed. It's essentially, well, it's been modified by farming, so it's not natural, like purely natural, but it's as natural or more natural than any other river we've got. And it's got stretches which are open braided river systems, and keeping a control on the weeds and pests is really, really important. Like, I'm involved in 2 other projects here in Kaikoura. Like, I chair the Hutt and Shearwater Charitable Trust, and my wife also runs the banded dotterel program here. And in both of those things, it's clear that cats are a major issue for wildlife. Like for ground nesting birds, hedgehogs and cats are the big problem. So the birds we have in the Clarence, the black-fronted terns, and we've got banded dotterels up there. All those ground nesting birds, they're in trouble when it comes to cats and hedgehogs. So having this ongoing involvement in predator control is a great thing. It's something we need to keep up. It's not something that you can put money into and forget about until we actually, as we do put enough money and effort into it to actually deal to them permanently. But for now, that looks unlikely in the next decade or so. So yeah, we have to continue with this funding. We need to continue the work on the predator control, on the weed control. There's so much potential for things to go sideways with broom in particular, but also with gorse and briar. We had a major fire in the Clarence earlier this year, and that was just a series of private rafters that let a fire get out of control. It just got away on them, but that consumed 400 hectares just from one small fire from a set of campers. So yeah, our focus on the Clarence is a big thing, and working with those landowners that are prepared. So we've got several smallish projects wetland projects, riparian planting projects that we'll be focused on this year. But the main allocation of our funding will be for that ongoing work in the clearance. Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Ted. And sorry, Mel, I was thinking you were with Kaikoura, but I actually know you're with Waimakariri. Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Thank you, Ted. I'm not just going to refer you to the CWMS targets. I'm not going to ask you a question about them. It's just that previous other chairs of the zone committees, I've said, look, I'm going to be really interested for information about more, I guess, more specificity around those. Just letting you know, commenting to you about that. What I wanted to also comment on, though, Ted, is particularly your item in relation to the regenerative farming koro in Kaikoura. So really pleased to hear that, especially because regeneration of our natural environment is one of our key strategic objectives. And I'm just wondering, though, with the event that was held, is the potential for that networking to continue in some ways?
I'm sure there is. Like Tony Blunt, who's one of our councillors, a long-term councillor, he's very interested in this. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of echo.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, Tony's been very interested in this. He won the Young Farmer of the Year contest many years ago, and he's very influential in our local farming community, and he's pushing these events as hard as he can. So there's substantial interest, and like as I often say, like working with nature, we're working with complex systems that are eternally changing, and getting that awareness, just getting the information out there that we need to be working with the natural systems alongside our modified ones, conserving both. That's been my key message my whole time on the zone committee. And yeah, I agree. It's great to see these things like regenerative agriculture getting some headlines and getting a bit of local traction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Mackay.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd just like to introduce David Ashby and Caroline Latham, along with their facilitator, Mark Griffin, who's sitting in the room for Waimakariri. They'll be speaking shortly. I just do have a comment and a question for you, Ted, quickly. I've had some really positive comments from quite a number of people around the work that's been going on the Waitoa clearance and the clearing and the investment that a number of agencies actually now have put into weed control and pest control on that, and certainly acknowledge that there's still a long way to go. So yeah, something positive is coming out. We're starting to get a little bit of movement in the wider public's eyes as well, that something positive is actually happening there. Just if I could go back to the wetland projects, and there's been a lot of work over a number of years there since the earthquake, with some MPI funding, some immediate steps funding, and some work that the zone committee's done. On the number, certainly, of dairy farmers that MPI funding was put over, have you had really good support there? Is it? I mean, you might not get 100%, but have you had, by and large, good support?
Yeah, I'd say probably half of the farmers have been engaged in some positive way. Like we've had the Ngari wetland is probably the biggest single project that we've been working on, and that's gone really well. But there's a lot more discussion now in the meetings I have with farmers about the idea that, yeah, okay, it may just make economic sense as well as ecological sense to retire some of these wetter areas. And so guys like Phil Richardson have retired some areas, and that little project, which we contributed to as some immediate steps funding, has worked really well. And yeah, several others in the pipeline. So it's happening. The conversations are spreading wider, and that's great to see. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Ted. Any other questions? All right, well, we'll move on to the next zone committee now. Ted, thank you very much for taking the time and thank you for sitting in this morning. And you'll be pleased to know that we have had some small conversations about cats since coming up to Kaikoura a couple of weeks ago. So that's excellent. All right, moving on.
Thank you, Ted.
Yeah. See you later. Now we're moving on, and the next people speaking, I'll get this right in a minute. Sorry, Waimakariri is next, and on my list, it's not you, Matt. I'll get this sorted in a minute. I'm really sorry, but it's Waimakariri. So I'll ask you both to come up to the table. Yeah, David and Carolyn. Yes, thank you. So over to you both.
Thank you. I'm just, my name's David Ashby. I'm the ex-chairman of the Waimakariri Zone Committee, and I'm here on behalf of the current chair, Michael Blackwell, who is currently recovering from surgery. So unfortunately, he gave his apologies. He's convalescing at home at the moment and was unavailable for today's meeting. So Caroline Latham and Cam Henderson, the deputy chair, is in the climate change meeting next door. So Caroline Latham and myself are here today to present the annual report and respond to any questions. But so without further ado, I'll call on Carolyn, who has been actively involved in the establishments of the three groups that we've established within the zone within the last 12 months. So.
Well, thanks, David. I guess you've all had a read of the report, so feel free to ask any questions. Sorry, well, I only found out that I was doing this 2 days ago, just as I was heading off to Twizel for work. So I've just driven back from Twizel this morning.
No trouble. We'll just go with the flow. So who would like to ask a question? Councillor Grant Edge.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks for driving all that way for a few questions. I was just picking up on your catchment group progress. How are you going with that? I was at a river rating group and for the Ashley Rakahuri, and it was mentioned that you were organising something. So I was wondering if you could let us know where you're at.
Well, I don't know whether you want the long answer or the short answer to that, because as you're aware, we were very focused on catchment management plans when we were doing our ZIP addendum. So we didn't get a lot of traction with that after the ZIP addendum was signed off. And I guess that over time, it became apparent, and I had some training in the area of catchment groups through beef and lamb, which was a bit of a light bulb moment for me. And that actually, if you're going to have a catchment management plan, like a community catchment management plan, you really need the community to be engaged in it, and you need to have them as the starting point rather than the plan itself, because they need to help develop the plan. And so we kind of refocused our thinking in that area, and yeah, sort of started looking into catchment groups. I guess in my area, which is the saltwater creek that runs into Ashley estuary, Te Aka Aka, we'd had the COVID lockdown, didn't have a lot of work on at the time, and I thought, why don't I start a catchment group? So I rang a few people that I knew in the area. They each gave me the name of a couple of other people who might be interested. Ended up with a group of 10 who said, yeah, we could do something like this. Had a meeting, had about 35 along to it, and we've probably had about 4 meetings since then, of which we've probably consistently hit sort of 10 or 12 people coming along. It still feels kind of tenuous in that, is this going to last? Is this going to become a meaningful group or not? So I'm just continuing to
as long as people are interested, there's still 35 people getting all the notes and that we write up as a result of each time we get together and talk about the things that we do. So yeah, hopefully, I feel like the zone committee's role in that kind of thing is helping to keep the momentum going. Obviously, Judith and I are members of that catchment group, and so along with Landcare Trust, who've been a great help and support. Yeah, we'll just keep at it and see where we get to, sort of thing. And we've also been, I've been talking to some farmers on the other side of the estuary, in the Taranaki stream area, and there's a couple of the dairy farmers there who are quite keen. It's just been a question of timing with workload, and so I'm hoping that we may also, again with Landcare Trust, be able to do something in that area as well. And then I think David's probably been involved with you may all remember or have heard of the Next Generation Farmers Group. They kind of got up and running in order to ensure that they were represented throughout the PC7 or the Zipper discussions, so their views were taken into account, which was really good for the zone committee. And so they have now kind of morphed into the Waimakariri Landcare Group, Waimakariri Landcare Trust. And so there's still parts of the group who are interested in the planning side of things, and we'll keep a focus on that. But there's a large portion of the farmers in the Plains area who really just want to get on with trying to work out what they need to do to remedy the issues that are arising in that area on the ground rather than on paper kind of thing. Yeah, so they've been granted quite a considerable sum of money, a couple of 100,000 or something like that, I think. 500,000. So that's a really good sum of money to get some meaningful action up and going. I think they've also got they split into 4 or 5 focus groups, and a small group and each focus group is trying to work out what people are interested in, what events they could be running, what sort of information is wanted. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. And the Sefton Saltwater Creek Catchment Group was also granted $10,000 from ECAN for riparian planting and $1,500 for administration. So that has been given to 2 of our landowners, and each landowner's got about 3 kilometres of waterway through their farms. So that's going to be a good kickstart for them, because they've clearly got a lot in front of them with so much waterway.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. We just keep going here. I've got Tumu Taiao, Yang Cranwell next. He would like to ask you a question.
Tēnā kōrua, kia ora, Carolyn. I just see in the progress report, I take it as I've read it, but I've seen this handsome man on the front there, his photo twice. I've seen he's been doing some shed talks. Just wondering how the Mahinga Kai shed talks have been going, and how the communities they've related to it, and then taking the talks on board.
I've been to one workshop that Macca gave for the zone committee and anyone else who wanted to come along, and that was really useful, good information. And I gather that the response from farmers has been pretty good. I know there's been at least one workshop in our catchment that was well attended, I gather, and I think another one out on the plains, which was also well attended. So it's certainly something that we want to keep in the foreground. Yeah.
Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you both for coming and stepping up and talking with us. So to the end of the report, and I've had this question to Ted, and so I don't expect you to give me a specific answer, or it's just really to get your view about this. So when I've raised with other chairs, as I said to Ted, how with the CWM its targets, look, that they're fine and things are clearly following and work being done. But I'm just wondering if, in terms of those targets actually being more specific and as they come from the strategy, and if your zone committee will be open to working with their staff, say, to I guess, firming up.
In terms of the targets, that's obviously something that the regional committee has had a lot of involvement with, and that feeds down to the zone committees. So I'm not quite sure what your question is there in relation to the zone committees.
That helps me understand, because I'm getting to grips with how this all works still a year later. But I guess what in the future I would expect that the different zone committees will have different targets related to their whole catchment areas. And so it's, I guess I'm sure you're right, would be what the regional committee work up, and no doubt that will be discussed with the zone committee at some stage.
No, so
Carolyn, could you just put your button on? Sorry, please.
yeah, so the Biodiversity Trust is going to be modelled on the Te Arakakariki one that was set up in Selwyn. And we're sort of at the stage now where we've got a plan and we're starting to look for trustees for that. And that's had good support from the Waimakariri Land Group or Land Care Trust. So yeah, we're quite excited about that for our zone. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just finishing now with Councillor Claire Mackay.
Thank you, David and Caroline, coming on and presenting on behalf of the Waimakariri Waters Zone Committee today. Look, your light bulb moment, I think, Caroline, is really, really important for councillors to sit around here on the table, that this action, the on the ground actions, have to actually appear on the ground. It's you can't drag people screaming and kicking to something. They have to actually buy into it and become part of it to actually get those outcome changes. And I think that's just something that sometimes we can have a tendency to actually forget about. And I just like the way that the zone committee and the members or respective members have actually just quietly shepherded things along, and respect that that's probably your role, and the leadership actually comes out of the community. So really thank you and appreciate that. And I know you personally have shared with me before around the idea of the biodiversity group, and I commended you at the time, and I just commend the committee coming up and taking that on board. So yeah, just on behalf of a local out of that district, just thank you and the rest of the members, if you can pass that on, for the work that you do for the Waimakariri. Thank you.
So thank you very much, David and Caroline. Do you want to finish off?
I'd just like to say that Carolyn and Judith, Dr. Judith Rope-Lindsay, have worked tirelessly on the zone committee, and and the effort that they've put in, particularly in relation to the Biodiversity Trust, setting some of the priority goals, the work that has happened in the catchment group, and then also the work that with the morphing of the next generation farms group into the Waimakariri Land Care Group. And we've got Cam Henderson and now Erin Harvey, who are going to be trustees of that particular trust. So we've got some traction going forward as to where we can see, rather than the paper fest, we're going to see stuff happening on the ground. So now that we've got some government funding, a significant amount of government funding for that group, we're starting to see some real action on the ground, which is where we want to, which is what everybody wants to see, rather than just a talk fest. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. That's so true. That is what we all want, and we're all in this together. So thank you both, and on behalf of the council, thank you very much for your great work, and yours obviously, Carolyn. And thanks for coming here today and driving all the way up from and where you came from. And you are invited to stay for lunch with us if you'd like to. We've got some real yummy lunch out here, so I'd stay if I was you, if you've got 5 minutes. Now we'll just move on to Matt. Matt, it's your turn now. I'm sorry you've had to wait so long. Over to you, and you can hear us and everything?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Can you hear? Okay, great.
Can you hear me?
Can, yeah, everybody can hear you. So over to you. What would you like to tell us about the Upper Waitaki Zone Committee?
Well, firstly, kia ora tātou, team. Ko Araki Timanga, ko Waitaki Te Awa, ko Matt Bayless Aho. Just firstly, I'm here speaking on behalf of our committee chair, Simon Cameron. He's unavailable today. I'm the deputy chair, so deputising for him today. And most importantly, on behalf of the Upper Waitaki Zone Committee, I'd like to acknowledge the recent passing of one of our members, John Wilkie. He holds great mana with the Upper and Lower Waitaki Zone Committees. Kaitiaki of the Waitaki Tuna. John leaves with us a legacy of kaitiakatanga of Te Manahuna and the Waitaki, and we are all very deeply saddened by his loss. So you have the report in front of you. As much as I'd like to spend the next hour or so basking in the glory of our achievements of 2020, I'll just skim across a couple of the key highlights here. Number one for us has been a successful piece of engagement, community engagement activity in Amarama with the Amarama Catchment Collective. Particularly the two significant farming members in our committee have managed, along with a lot of help from the ECAN staff, to pull together this collective to address the declining water quality in the Aruru arm of Lake Benmore. So whilst recent results indicate an improvement, the longer term trend remains of concern to us. It's a significantly complex issue to address, but the starting point, as I think I heard Caroline say before, is engagement. And given the starting point with that community, to get to a point now where we have significant members of our farming community in that area willingly and collaboratively working together to solve that problem is a great starting point. Similarly, sadly, Lake Ruataniwha was in the national news last summer with an E. coli outbreak impacting a prized recreational asset for our community. However, I need to draw your attention to the fantastic response of the stakeholders, which is hugely encouraging. So we still have not pinpointed the source, but clearly doing nothing was not an option. Having the local businesses, Runanga, the district council, and many other people on board, just to explore every avenue we had to address that serious issue, is something we're acutely proud of. So this recent summer's education campaign and funding from both ECAN and the Mackenzie District Council have helped us put in place temporary toileting facilities there, and so far so good. In our report, you'll see quite a bit of initial steps biodiversity activity. I think I heard Caroline say before, 3 kilometres of fence. I sure wish fences in the Mackenzie could be that short. Our funding gets spread very thinly over a wide number of projects, and the committee in this last year and this year are focusing on circling back to those projects to ensure we're achieving the outcomes as expected. One particular area we've been focusing on, which is weed control in the Dobson Valley, and that's just a case study in how effective that activity can be when agencies and the community get together. So with the Department of Conservation, LINZ and the landowner, and coordination and initial steps biodiversity funding contribution from the Zone Committee, 2019 to 2023 is going to see something like $250,000 spent protecting this braided river system and wetlands from Cotonesta, Lupin, Willow and Elderberry. And we believe as a committee that's just absolutely outstanding. So I'll just wrap up by saying the Upper Waitaki Zone Committee covers a vast landscape. It's sometimes quite daunting just to sit in committee and realise the extent of the issues and activities we need to be across. But one area the Zone Committee we believe has been very effective in is engaging with their communities and various stakeholders to achieve collaboration and collective effort. And I've just given you a few examples of those. And it would be wrong of me not to give a bit of a shout out to the Environment Canterbury staff which support the Zone Committee. Sometimes they're on the receiving end of some unhelpful press and commentary from within the community. we find ourselves working with some incredibly hard-working, competent and passionate people, but we'd just like more. So, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Well, thank you very much. Now, Councillor John Sunkel would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Matt, and we equally have recognised the contribution of John Wilkie here today at the beginning of our meeting. Sadly, as a loss, and I had the opportunity with Councillor Mackay to visit with him just a couple of days before he died, so it was good to have that chat, and his enthusiasm for everything that he had done and wished he could continue to do remained right until the end. Look, thank you guys, and your point towards the end of I guess the magnitude of the area that is the Mackenzie from the pass right up to the Lindis Pass and everything in between. And it was great to be out last month, Glenmore Station and around one of the other lakes, looking at the projects we're putting in place and I guess the size of the landscape and the work that was done around some of the kettle tarns that we're doing in that space, and equally the research that's happening within the environment. So it's not just us within Environment Canterbury, and you highlighted the point that the 5 agencies really are involved. It's not as in some other zones where there's us, ECAN, and a few landowners and council bits and pieces. The magnitude of ownership and challenges is great. So really appreciate the work and effort that you and the whole team have put in, and the enthusiasm that comes with that, and the personalities that really prick and challenge. And I just say that I have a draft list of I guess actions for the following year, and it's only draft, but again, our first priority is Mahinga Kai and opportunities and waterways, continued management of visitor impacts, support for catchment groups, which we've got the one set up, looking for another one in the Tekapo area to engage with the local board and get things going there. Increased and continued support of our biodiversity. You mentioned the tens or hundreds of kilometres of fencing that might be required, and weed control, that continuing in community engagement and limits. So it is almost a limitless world down there, you can dream to believe, and it would be any number of people's lifetimes to get on top of things. But I think you and that catchment are really doing a great job. So to you and the committee and Simon, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Councillor Peter Scott.
Hi, Matt, and thanks for standing in. Good to see you on screen. You're larger than life. You're on our big screen, so it's
Kia ora, Peter.
And there's 2 of you actually, which is even better. That's just a general comment from you in terms of that wilding pine work that's going on up there. I know around the dams, especially Benmore, it's quite dramatic in terms of the removal of all that vegetation. Are the zone committee involved in thinking about what that change in vegetation should be going back to? Because it is quite dramatic.
The short answer to that, Peter, if you could hit your button.
Oh, sorry.
The short answer to that is no. The committee have routinely been drawn into the wilding pine debate in Te Manahuna Mackenzie. It's impossible not to get drawn into the wilding pine debate. It's a massive issue, but we're attempting to stay in our lane, which is water. So we do from time to time get different members of the public or speakers come to committee. We will contribute and provide input where we can, but we have to stay in our lane.
I asked that question from a ratepayer's point of view in Otamatata, Matt, and there's a lot of chat down there in terms of what's going to happen. So it's good to know that you're not going to be the font of all knowledge on that, so we can chase up somewhere else.
Peter, as you're well aware, I think everyone can see it, I wear more than one hat. Offline, I'm more than happy to talk to you about the efforts at the company I work for, and also the efforts of some of the other community organisations I support taking to eradicate wilding pine in the Mackenzie.
Well,
thanks, Matt.
Very much, Councillor Scott. And I think that's just about brought us to the end of the questions. And thank you, Matt, for all the work that you're doing down there. It sounds like with other hats as well. So and so what we're going to do now is probably sign off. And sorry you had to wait for a bit of time. If you were here, we'd invite you to lunch, but we can you can think about us having lunch. Thanks very much.
Kia ora, team.
So now I'd just like to call for a mover that we receive the Kaikoura Zone Committee annual report, the Waimakariri one, and the Upper Waitaki Zone Committee annual. Moved by Councillor Claire Mackay, seconded by Councillor Craig Pauling. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There not being anybody opposed, I declare that carried. Thank you all very much. Now we're going to adjourn for lunch, and visitors are invited to come.